That's a great question. Just make sure that as I answer that you understand what I'm saying here. When you have a 30, 60, 90, you might have a 30 here, Maddie. You might have a 30 here. The triangle might be over here. So it could be anywhere. So, but wherever the 30 ends up, the 1 is going to go across from 30. The 2 is always the hypotenuse. And then across from 60 is always root 3. But again, the triangle might be over here, over here. The 60 might be flipped, but across from 30 is always the 1. And that's usually where I start as we label 1, 2, root 3. Now, sometimes students look at these answers and they're like, I feel like mine's flipped, or I feel like, a number's backwards. Sometimes that means something's wrong with the sketch. I'm happy to go over something specific if you guys want to. Are you sure? You guys good, Asia? So based on what you're saying, it appears you already understand that the answer kind of starts that way. Are you sure? Okay, because we can go back for anyone, but when you fix number 2, it sounds like that what you're saying here, you multiply by root 3. Here's the thing. This 2 is not allowed to multiply into this root 3 because it's not a root 2. If that was a root 2, then we would get root 6. So again, it turns out that we just get 2 root 3 over 3. Do we need to go back a step with number 2? So anything else? Okay, now again, if you're like, yeah, I'd like to talk about something, maybe ask when we were working on a little practice activity in a few minutes. Okay, make sure you get your needs met. I'm happy to talk to you individually. Let's talk about the thinker question. Actually, pretty impressed with how many of you tried it. And I know you would say, yeah, but I didn't get it. But you actually got some things that you're going to say, oh man, I could have finished that. So now, Caleb, I'm calling on you because you started something and it was a great start. You did something with y equals 5x. Remember what you did? There's a lot of good math in that. So I'll just kind of pause on that a second. How'd you know to draw the angle that way? And some of your classmates did it too, but how'd you know to draw the line that way? Like, where'd this line come from? Okay, hey, that's fair enough. It is true. I kind of forgot that I put that there, so that is helpful. Let me maybe also add to this, and some of you may have thought this way, that's how you graph y equals mx plus b. This is y equals 5x plus 0. Y equals mx plus b. It has a y-intercept of 0. And not to steal your thunder, so how did you get these numbers here? Yeah, and this number right here is like the slope. This number is like the slope, and these lines, these legs, represent a rise and a run. A rise of 5 and a run of 1. Okay, now, whether you got it right or not yesterday, do you guys see how this problem is starting to look like everything that we've done in the last few days? We've got a triangle. We've got legs. Okay, now some of you thought, you're like, yeah, there should be a hypotenuse, but you realize now that you can find the hypotenuse. Pythagorean theorem to the rescue. Okay, and for some of you, that was the only thing that was missing from your attempt last night. You can do the Pythagorean theorem. It turns out that it's kind of random. You get 26 equals r squared, so you get root 26. Haven't really seen that number, but it would have to be the hypotenuse that goes with this rise and this run, this leg and this leg. And then you're home free. You can find sine, cosine, tangent. All right, and you're really close, Kara. That was actually, it's what, do you see the part that you missed?
I think I put 26, but seeing as 24, so then I simplified it to root 6.
All right, thanks for, I was kind of curious, but yeah. But yeah, again, as a class, I'm glad that you guys try. I want to do some more stuff like that. When you see that stuff, don't just be like, well, I'll skip that. Try it. Some of you need more of that. All of you need a little more of that. And you can do it. Anything else on sort of the regulars? There's been something brewing. It's not pot of coffee, although maybe you like that. But it's kind of these problems that we call trig values, like the answers that you're finding, the types of problems that I'm starting you with. They're all trig value problems. And I've created like a little matching activity that you're going to do on your computer. Don't get it out yet or turn it on. I actually kind of want to give you a quick example to help you guys start to see how these three types of problems are similar and yet they're still a little bit different. Now this can look a little overwhelming. First of all, there's three different things up here. There's a question, there's an answer, and then there's like a category. And maybe the new thing right now is, do you realize like the categories? I want students to not just get answers, but know what type of problem you're doing. So you can watch. I'm going to actually work some of this out. Some people choose to write this down. Just so you know, you're going to do this then, and you'll kind of get a chance anyway. But this is kind of a nice summary too. So again, if you do want to write it down. Now, I don't think you're going to write all this down. This is kind of messy, but I'm going to work it out. And when we work it out, you might want to follow at that time. How about this one? Okay. I know there's a lot of boxes up here, but it says find the tangent of 45. Okay. That's like the kind of problem you just did last night. If I give you an angle, like a tried and true angle, 45 degrees, okay, the category kind of matches. Obviously, I've given you an angle, and we'll solve that in a second. How about this one right here? It's actually kind of problem we haven't done since last week, but usually once you look at it again, you're like, well, geez, you gave me a point. Right. I'm giving you a point. Okay, so the category for that one, again, it's kind of redundant, but that's a point. Now, if you're saying, what do I do with that? We'll do it. We'll figure it out. This is the one that, usually gives people the most trouble because it's kind of fancy. There's all this math up here. But here's the deal. That is a trig value. It's like I'm giving you a trig value. Okay, and then you might notice that I'm going to ask you to find another one. Okay, these are all three different problems, but they all kind of become the same problem. Let's go back to the angle one. It tends to be the one that people like the most. You just did it. So if I give you the tangent of 45, you're going to sketch 45. Okay, it's kind of like, what else would you do? I mean, it's pretty natural. You're going to sketch 45. And then you make that triangle. Now, as you make the triangle, as you sketch 45, you should come to the point where you realize it's a special triangle. I'm only ever going to give you a special triangle. So, of course, it's a 45, 45, 90. Now, nobody asked about it in the last couple seconds, but remember, the sides of a 45, 45, 90, that's the 1, 1, root 2. And you do have to memorize that, okay? You can't kind of mix up the numbers and is it root 2, is it root 3? No, it's 1, 1, root 2, and it always goes that way. Okay, make sure positives and negatives are fine. It turns out that everything's positive for this problem. So we can jump in here and do the tangent of 45. As long as you remember that that's y over x, you'll write 1 over 1, and your answer is 1. Now, in the activity you're going to do on your computer in a couple seconds, you're going to like take all three of those boxes and you're actually going to drag them and match them. It's kind of fun, but you'll match then to the answer. How about this one, the point? It's actually the problem that goes back to last week, but what do you think? If I give you a point, what would you do with it? Well, what else could you do with it? You're going to sketch it. You're going to sketch the point. Now, sketch it carefully. And then there has to be the point that you realize, okay, that this negative 2 comma 3 was so that we could draw an angle. Okay, and that's kind of the little fancy stuff here about the terminal side, blah, blah, blah. But we get the terminal side, we get an angle. Okay, and then as all these problems go, we get back to a triangle. Okay, so you're at a point where you can identify the legs. Now, remember how the legs of the triangle are actually the point. That's kind of neat. And then you got to realize, oh, I need to find the radius. Now, don't do something silly and tell me that the radius is like root 2 or root 3, okay? That's only in a special triangle. Maybe you have to find the radius, like, you know, the Pythagorean theorem. Like the thinker question. But yeah, you do the Pythagorean theorem, you end up be careful, you actually get 13 for r squared, so it's the square root of 13. Okay, now it's a matching activity. You can kind of see like what's up here, but make sure you know how to find the sign. Make sure you know how to find the sign. It's just y over r. So, you know, 3 is y, r is root 13. And as was asked a few seconds ago, you know, clean that up, clean up root 13. But all that really does is create 3 root 13 over 13. So that's given a point. And when you're given a point, you can make a sketch, just like honestly all the problems, but we'll match the answer. Okay, now, you know, it's a matching activity. So yes, this is the last answer, but let's make sure you know how to do it, because this tends to be the problem that gives kids the most trouble. If I give you a trig value, like the sine equaling root 3 over 2, you got to interpret that. You interpret that as y over r. Okay, so I gave you y and r. Now, remember, there's other things that you would think about here, like that it's positive y. Of course, it's positive. There's no negative sign. But if there was a negative, you'd have to think about that. How about this stuff? 0 is less than theta is less than 90. Okay, well, it's actually describing to you the place where you're going to draw your angle. Okay, between 0 and 90. Now, you realize you don't really know exactly the tilt of that line. It doesn't matter. We just know that it's going to be somewhere between 0 and 90. And the good news is that the y value matches. It's positive. R is always positive. But now you can find x. Now, it turns out that these numbers are special because this is a 1, 2, root 3. So I found x just by noticing that, oh, it's a 1, 2, root 3. We could do the Pythagorean theorem if we had to. Find the cosine. Okay, that's the question. But we've got everything we need. We've got our sketch. We've got x over r. So that's why that last answer matches up with 1/2. Now, there's a practice activity. It's through Google Classroom, but it's going to take you to DESMOS. DESMOS is just like a little platform where we can do some math stuff. But But yeah, find it, okay? I think you'll have to sign in, use your Google to do that. But here's kind of the deal. You have about 20 minutes, and you're going to want to use some of that time to go through the matching. It works on a phone, too. Mm-hmm. You have about 20 minutes or so. You're going to use some of that time to go through the matching activity. Okay? Now, there's also a mini check, but I don't want you sitting there the whole time sort of like worried about the mini check. Okay? If you take your time and go through the little activity, you'll be fine on the mini check. But you do want to make sure you give yourself about 8 to 10 minutes to do the mini check, okay? So just sort of watch your time. Now, some kids want to scribble and scratch to do the DESMOS. Like, I don't think you're just going to be doing it all in your head. So do that. Kind of like I did on the chalkboard, scribble and scratch to work out what you need to.